I didn't move to Paris for fame. I moved for fabric, for the feel of it between my fingers. The language it speaks when it's draped, folded, stitched into something that makes people turn their heads without even knowing why. I didn't come to steal anyone's spotlight. I just wanted to earn my way into the room where it mattered. That room was Montal Atelier, one of the most exclusive, revered fashion houses in the world. Founded by the icon herself, Sylvie Montal. Her name wasn't just a brand, it was a bloodline. Whispers said she had ice in her veins and silk in her lungs. To be invited into her world, even as a junior designer, was a once-in-a-lifetime break, and I got in, barely. First as a sketch assistant, then as a silent ghost in fittings. Then, one night, after staying late to rework a misaligned seam, she looked over her shoulder and said, "Pass me the shears." That was it. My first real interaction. No praise, no warmth, but it meant I existed. Sylvie. Didn't teach, she expected. You were either fast enough or you weren't, either invisible or indispensable. I chose the latter. I arrived early, left late, said little, and soaked up every second. And in the margins of that silence, I stitched my own designs. Nothing radical, just ideas. Just me. I never expected them to be used. They weren't polished. They weren't Montal. But they were honest, fluid, movement and emotion in cloth. Pieces that felt like breath and heartbeat. I hid them in a drawer behind bolts of unused muslin. Just in case. Paris Fashion Week was 3 weeks away when Sylvie changed. Tense, restless, snapping at everyone, including me. The collection wasn't landing. She said it lacked punch. She blamed the models, the fabric, the lighting. Privately, she blamed herself. But publicly, she sharpened her tongue and looked for someone to cut. You need to be smarter about what you bring into my studio, she told me once, gesturing at a bias-cut dress I'd left on a dummy after hours. This isn't your diary. It was the first time she'd acknowledged my work. I said nothing, just nodded, took it down, folded it quietly. But I didn't stop designing because part of me knew. One day, the show would go wrong. One day, something would tear. And when it did, I'd be ready. It was less than 12 hours before the Paris show when the disaster hit. The final gown, the pièce de résistance of Sylvie Montal's fall collection, ripped up the side seam as the model twisted to turn. Not a small tear. A split, from hip to mid-rib. The kind of damage no press-on patch or last-minute ironing trick could fix. The room froze. A silence so loud it hurt. And Sylvie? She turned pale beneath her makeup. "Get the backup piece," she snapped. "Now!" But there was no backup. Everyone knew that gown was supposed to close the show. There had been no second draft. I stood, in the corner, watching interns scramble and stylists panic, knowing exactly what was coming. My fingers gripped the edge of my workstation. My heart beat like a metronome. Then the model looked at me. Not Sylvie. Me. She was clutching the torn fabric like it was skin. She whispered, "Is that the one you were working on last week?" I nodded. Slowly. Not sure if I was proud or terrified. The stylist, his hands shaking, muttered, "There's nothing else. We're out of time." Sylvie turned her gaze toward me like a dagger unsheathed. "What are you staring at?" She snapped. "If you've got something that fits, bring it out." I moved without speaking, straight to the muslin rack, where I'd hidden the piece. It wasn't fully finished, not by runway standards, but it was whole. It was clean. It moved like smoke. I slipped it over the model's shoulders. It fell around her like a second skin. And for a moment, the panic eased. We didn't rehearse it. No one briefed the show director. The lights weren't calibrated. But when she stepped onto that runway, something shifted. The room leaned forward. Even I held my breath. I watched through the side curtains as my design, my after-hours, too emotional design, hit the runway like a breath of fresh air. It wasn't just that people liked it, they reacted to it. Cameras snapped, phones rose, murmurs turned to applause. By the time the model reached the end of the runway and turned, people were standing. For a piece no one had ever seen before, for a dress Sylvie hadn't touched. When she returned backstage, the model turned to me and whispered, "They clapped for you." I couldn't breathe. Sylvie didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her expression said everything. I didn't sleep that night. I waited for the aftershock. It came the next morning, a knock on my door, an envelope. Inside, a formal termination letter, signed by HR. No explanation. No thank you. Just the clean edge of power being exercised. My badge was disabled. My email locked. The dress, still hanging backstage, was already labeled as part of the Montal collection. She didn't just fire me, she erased me. But the one thing she couldn't erase was what happened on that runway, and the internet never forgets. By the end of the week, Sylvie's collection was everywhere. Vogue, BOF, LA, all praising the show's dramatic finish. Headlines used words like rebirth and bold finale. But one thing stood out. None of the pre-show press materials had listed the final dress. It wasn't in the lookbook, not in the backstage reels, not in the designer's statement. At first, no one noticed, but fashion people are detail-obsessed. A few editors began asking questions. Who designed the closer? Was that a surprise piece? Why wasn't it credited? I watched from my couch in sweatpants, feeling like I was floating in someone else's dream or nightmare. I hadn't told anyone yet, not even my old classmates or my mother. The firing felt personal, humiliating. I didn't want to look bitter. But then I got a DM. A stylist who'd been backstage during the chaos. He wrote, "I know that dress was yours. If you ever want someone to back you up, say the word." I stared at the message for 20 minutes before replying. "Do you have proof?" 10 minutes later, he sent me a grainy video, taken during the prep frenzy. It showed me adjusting the dress. On the model, pinning the waist, stitching the final hem. No sound, just me working, focused, real. The timestamp was 3 hours before the show. I was in my studio apron. My name tag was clearly visible. Proof, I didn't post it. Not yet. But I saved it. Along with the sketches I'd uploaded weeks earlier. My Google Drive had all the version history, my initials, timestamps, even fabric order receipts. Then came the blog post. A small but respected fashion blogger posted an article titled, "Who Designed the Final Look at Montal?" It broke down everything. Photos, frame-by-frame analysis of the model's turn, and speculation that it didn't match the rest of the collection. It ended with a question. Why is the most praised piece the one we know the least about? I didn't sleep that night. My inbox started filling with interview requests. Quiet ones. No big names yet. Just people asking, "Is it true?" I didn't answer until I got an email from someone I couldn't ignore. A junior editor at Vogue Runway. Young, hungry, smart. She wrote, "Off the record, we've reviewed backstage footage. If it's yours, you should say so now, because this window doesn't stay open long." That was the moment I knew. Sylvie might have fired me, but I wasn't the only one holding scissors anymore. The world was starting to cut through the fabric of her lie. It started slowly. A tweet here, a blog post there. Then someone stitched the grainy footage of me adjusting the gown with runway clips from the final walk. The side-by-side went viral overnight. By morning, fashion Twitter was ablaze, not just with speculation, but with outrage. "This is the real designer," one caption read. Another, "Uncredited brilliance. Shameful industry behavior. Within 48 hours, the story hit mainstream fashion sites. LA ran a headline, "Who really created the look that stole Paris?" Then came a tidal wave of influencers, stylists, and former interns sharing stories, how Sylvie routinely ignored junior designers, claimed credit for last-minute saves, and erased anyone who challenged her spotlight. I still hadn't spoken. Not officially, but my silence was now seen as grace, not guilt. And then, just as the buzz threatened to eclipse the original show, Sylvie released a statement. Polished, cold, strategic. The finale piece was a collaborative team effort. We regret any confusion and remain committed to uplifting young talent. No apology, no names, no truth, and it backfired. The internet doesn't like gaslighting, not when there's video, not when there are receipts. A well-known designer posted, if she really believed in her team, she wouldn't have fired the girl who saved her show. It was the first time someone used the word fired. That night, I did something terrifying. I spoke. I uploaded a single post, an image of the sketch, my design files, the time-stamped Google Drive, and the backstage video side by side with the runway moment. Caption: "This was mine. And I'm done pretending otherwise." It exploded. 100K likes in a day. DMs from editors, emails from competing brands, interview requests, apologies from old classmates, a single-word message from the stylist, finally. But the most shocking call came from an unexpected number. Sylvie herself, blocked, then unblocked, then calling again. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail. "You've made your point. I hope you understand what this will do to both of us." She sounded tired, not sorry, not threatened, just angry that she lost control. But it was never about revenge for me. It was about the dress, the moment, the truth that couldn't be pinned to someone else's label. And now, finally, people weren't just hearing it, they were seeing it. And this time, they believed it was mine. The morning after I posted the proof, everything changed. My inbox, once full of rejection letters and silence, was now overflowing. Editors, recruiters, brands I'd admired since I was 16. One message simply read, "Are you ready to lead your own show?" It didn't feel real, but the world was watching, and I had to decide. Was I going to stay in the shadows Sylvie built for me, or step into the light they tried to blind me with? The junior editor from Vogue called first. She wanted an interview, not just a soundbite, feature. She'd seen the footage, cross-referenced the sketch data, talked to 3 staffers who confirmed I'd designed the dress. She said, "You're not the story because you were fired. You're the story because you were right." I agreed. Carefully, nervously. But I did it. The interview dropped 2 days later. The headline read, "The Hidden Hand Behind Paris's Boldest Look." And beneath it, my name. The article went viral. But this time, I wasn't the one keeping quiet. I owned it. I shared it. I answered questions, gave interviews. And then the first contract offer came in from a boutique label in Milan. Then another from a capsule collection agency in New York. Then a DM from a creative director at a competitor brand of Montal. If she won't give you credit, we will. Even a luxury retailer reached out asking if I had anything ready to license. I didn't. Not yet. But I told them to give me 4 weeks, and then I got an email that stopped me cold. Subject: "We owe you an apology." It was from an old classmate. One who had once told me I was too sensitive to survive the fashion world. She admitted she'd heard rumors before about Sylvie, but stayed silent. That email reminded me, this wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who'd been silenced, dismissed, ghosted. So I started designing again. Fast. Not to prove anything, but to speak in the language I trusted most. Fabric, shape, story. And in every new piece, I stitched one line of embroidery, hidden but permanent. You can't erase what was sown in truth, because now they knew my name, and this time it was never coming off the label. I worked out of a rented studio apartment in the Mare, bare walls, no AC, and just enough space for one dress form, 2 sketchbooks, and a borrowed sewing machine. But every corner of it pulsed with energy. The dress that changed everything sat folded in a glass case by the window, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. That silence had once cost me everything, and I was never going back to silence again. The collection I was building wasn't traditional. It didn't follow a theme. It followed a mood. I called it uncredited. Each look was inspired by a moment I'd been overlooked, critiqued, sidelined, dismissed. It wasn't about anger, it was about honesty, raw, exposed seams, reversed linings. Labels stitched deliberately on the outside. And inside every garment, a line of red thread running through the hem. My signature. My scar. My power. I gave myself 4 weeks. I lived off coffee and leftover cafe bread. Friends dropped off supplies. Old classmates sent fabric swatches and seam rippers with notes like, "For Paris, round 2. By week 3, I had 9 completed pieces. None of them perfect. All of them real. And then came the email that changed everything. Again. Subject: Style Week, Final Day Showcase. Offer one of the city's emerging designer showcases had a last-minute cancellation. Someone had pulled out due to creative differences. They wanted me to fill the spot. I had 4 days. No PR team, no casting. Director. No assistant, just me. And the story they tried to bury. I accepted instantly. I sent out a call on social media for volunteer models. Within hours, I had 20 responses, most from girls who'd never walked before but said they loved what I stood for. I didn't care about perfection. I cared about message. And these women? They were the message. The venue was small, industrial, nothing like the runways of Paris Fashion Week. But it was mine. As I walked the space with a clipboard and fabric swatches tucked into my coat, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not fear. Not fury. But freedom. This wasn't just a comeback. It was a declaration. And in 4 days, the fashion world would finally hear it. Loud, honest, and uncredited no more. Show day arrived like a storm. Every minute felt like lightning, sharp, bright, and impossible to ignore. The venue was packed before I even arrived. Friends, students, bloggers, and more than a few familiar industry faces who'd once walked past me like I was part of the carpet. I stepped inside and felt the air change, buzzing, tense, reverent. There was no velvet rope, no champagne tray, just a raw concrete floor and a single backdrop. A stitched panel of muslin embroidered with red thread in block letters. Uncredited. Backstage, my models were already dressed. No heels, barefoot, no overstyling, hair. Anna natural. They stood in a circle as I made final checks. Then someone tapped my shoulder. It was the event organizer. "Just a heads up. Sylvie Montal is in the room." I blinked. "She's here? Second row. Didn't RSVP. Walked in 5 minutes ago." My pulse didn't race. My hands didn't shake. Instead, I smiled. Because now she had to watch, without controlling a thing. The music began. Slow, haunting cello layered over the sound of shears cutting fabric. The first model stepped out in a piece titled Overseen. Rough silk, raw hem, a center seam hand-stitched. In blood red, the crowd leaned forward. They weren't watching fashion. They were reading it. The second look, unspoken. A structured coat with the label sewn deliberately on the outside. My name. Visible. Proud. Each piece walked like a sentence. A full paragraph. By the 5th model. And by the 7th? A confession. Then came the dress, the reworked version of the one that had saved Sylvie's show. Only now it was resewn, repurposed, and renamed, revoked. This time, there was no confusion. No mistaking it. The crowd knew. They remembered. And when the model turned at the end of the runway, she opened the back to reveal a hidden panel stitched with a single line. I designed it. And I'm still here. The applause started slowly. A few brave claps. Then it spread like fire. People stood. Phones rose. And somewhere in the second row, Sylvie couldn't stop the wave rising around her. I didn't walk the runway. I stood backstage and watched my work speak without me. But when the show ended, the crowd didn't leave. They waited. So I walked out. No spotlight, no speech. Just me, in jeans and thread-stained fingers, stepping into the light they'd once denied me. And when I reached center, the applause didn't pause, because they weren't just clapping for the clothes. They were clapping for the voice that had stitched its way out of silence. The applause faded, but the impact didn't. By the time I stepped off the stage, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Messages, missed calls, mentions, an email with the subject line, "We need to talk licensing." I sat in a corner backstage, breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. Models hugged me. A buyer handed me a card. A stranger whispered, "You just changed the game." But what mattered most came a few minutes later, when the crowd had thinned and most of the press had packed up. Sylvie walked in. She wasn't flanked by handlers. She wasn't performing. Just her, in black, clutching her bag too tightly. We stood, a few feet apart in the echo of the venue. She looked at me and said, "It was powerful." "The show." I said nothing. "I taught you well," she added, like a last defense. I looked her in the eye and replied, "No, you tried to erase me, and I made sure you couldn't." She didn't respond. She just left. Silently. No grand exit, and I realized that was her ending. Mine was just beginning. Over the next few weeks, everything accelerated. The uncredited collection sold out. I signed with an independent label that gave me full creative control. I hired 2 of the seamstresses Sylvie had let go. Brought in a young designer who'd been ghosted by 3 internships. We worked in a borrowed loft and called it the studio. We stitched at night, pitched by day, told the truth in every hem. 2 months later, Vogue Runway named me one of their next 10 to watch, and when they asked me to define my style, I didn't talk about silhouettes or color palettes. I said, I designed to be remembered by those who were told to forget themselves. But the final thread? That came a season later. The same Paris Fashion Week runway where I was once fired by email now invited me to close the final night, my own show. My name on every banner, I accepted. Quietly. Not for vengeance, but for visibility. Because somewhere out there, another designer was pinning her own sketch to a wall, wondering if anyone would ever call her more than an assistant. And I wanted her to know, we don't need permission to be seen. We just need a needle and the courage to pull the thread all the way through.